Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today I am joined by my friend Kat from the Creative Introvert. Kat is my social media manager, and throughout the year, she aggregates all of the questions that you guys ask in the Q&A box, in the Q&A chat section, and then we occasionally get together and do some videos. So I'm really happy to be here discussing topics today with you, Kat, and what's on the menu for today?
Thank you. So today we've got a question which is about why your horoscopes that you do on your channel sometimes work for people and sometimes they don't work.
Yeah.
Yeah, is this just to do with your astrological skill or what is it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm actually going to use a chart to demonstrate something on this one. But first, let me say a few things. So there are multiple reasons why sometimes a horoscope will hit and sometimes it won't, whether it's mine or anyone else's. This is something that people ask astrologers. As long as I've been an astrologer, I've heard this question asked. What is my horoscope work? Sometimes it's really like wow, and then other times feels like it doesn't hit as much. So here are the potential reasons that are pretty basic. One is the that an astrologer's skill may be in question. Like the astrologer may not be very good at horoscopes, or they may miss something in their interpretation that's really crucial. So sometimes, you'll find that some astrologers are better than others when it comes to horoscopes. I don't consider myself to be a particularly great horoscope forecaster. More experience that I have, the more I feel like I'm learning some things. But I really prefer reading birth charts, right? So, but because of this YouTube medium, I find that I'm often running through the 12 houses and rising signs and trying to give people some topics that might come up based on their rising sign. And I do, of course, my monthly overview horoscopes where I try to pick out the biggest transits of the month and how might they affect you based on your rising sign. Mostly what that's doing is looking at the combined energies of the planets and the houses in different combinations. So, first of all, astrologers will be more or less, experienced or good at that. And so that can be why sometimes something will hit and sometimes something will not hit. I don't consider that to be my like particular strong suit as an astrologer. But I wouldn't do it if I hadn't been encouraged enough month by month and hearing that they really do hit for a lot of people. But it's also pretty normal for them not to hit. So that's one reason. The other reason, in defense of astrologers, myself and others, is that um, the planetary archetypes and the way that they're playing out in, let's say, the 12 houses. Um, an archetype is like a jewel. You can turn it and the light will reflect off from it. And it's in that sense, like if you've ever, Joseph Campbell made this comment one time, which my friend always reminds me of when we talk. And he said, why is it that, in Indian religion, you see goddesses with 100 arms and 1,000,000 eyes? And why is it like, why the multiplicity of like limbs and arms and eyes and stuff like that? And Joseph Campbell said, this is because we need to recognize that a deity can speak in multiplicity, in a manifold or multivalent way, which is to say that it's really fun with my little girls right now to be teaching them how to notice archetypes. Like my daughter will have this or that kind of an experience, and I'm just starting to do things like, see, that's Mars, that's like Mars, or see, this is like Venus or whatever. And so pattern recognition and being able to see specific instances of first patterns or of archetypes is really, really diverse. Most of the way in which the planets are going to show up in our lives is going to be very concrete and specific. Like my story, I had a story the other day, Mars in Cancer, and a woman told me this. She said, "I have to tell you this story. Mars in Cancer. She's got kids like me. She likes when I tell stories about raising kids and stuff." And she said, "We had a chicken, and the chicken died. It got eaten by something, so it was pretty brutal, and we had to tell our kids about it. And I realized Mars was in Cancer, opposing Pluto, and I'm telling my kids about the fact that the chicken was murdered." While we're sitting in our family hot tub. and my kids are going through like a mourning and grieving session in this hot tub while we're talking about a dead chicken, and that was Mars opposing Pluto. Okay, so
kind of specific. I mean, I would forgive you for not calling that one out in your monthly horoscope.
right. So the point is that an astrologer has to try to grab for people the archetypal essence so that they can then see through that lens to notice its particularization in their life. And that's really hard to do because not only are the particulars manifestations so infinitely, specific and varied, but the way that you talk about the archetypes themselves and their interactions can be varied. Mars opposite Pluto could be a conversation about death with the family, but it also could be, something completely different, like, breaking glass right on the kitchen floor, something like that. So the point is that it is really hard for astrologers to grab the archetypal multidimensionality and communicate it in a way that people will be able to receive and then see playing out. The potential that they miss it, that they don't see something that's right in front of them in terms of the archetypes is always there. The possibility that the astrologer didn't describe it quite well enough for them to see it when it's already there. The possibility that the astrologer described a couple of angles, but not quite the angle on the planets that ended up manifesting. That's always there. And what's really hard about it is that as someone who's presenting the content as an astrologer, you have to try to capture all of that in really succinct, quick ways, because people who watch don't have long attention spans either. Like, you have about 30 to 40 minutes on YouTube before people check out. That's the, typical length anyway, that my own viewership will like drop off tremendously. So you have to be able to communicate things quickly, concisely, grab multidimensionality in this kind of manifold archetype, and then communicate it across 2, sometimes more houses. And the houses are like entire dimensions of archetypal experience with all sorts of topics involved. So that's why I prefer reading for people, because I can sit down and have a conversation, get a little bit of context. And once I have context, it narrows the field of possibilities. And then I can be very predictive, very descriptive, very helpful for people. But you're also, when you're an astrologer, you're speaking to an audience of literally thousands and thousands of people, and you're trying to communicate something of the essence of how these things will show up based on the rising sign of the chart. Now, the reason that the rising sign of the chart will work very nicely is because if you use whole sign houses, then the topics will be more or less consistent with horoscopes. Also, if you if you use whole sign houses and you use your rising sign rather than, say, your sun sign, the actual horoscope will line up with the same house configuration as your birth chart, which means that the transits of the planets to your birth chart will always match up with the horoscope you're listening to, as opposed to the sun sign, which is basically a horoscope cast with the sun in the first house. You're taking your sun sign and you're reorienting the whole chart so that the sun sign is the whole sign first house, but then all of the houses get completely rearranged and it's no longer your birth chart. So one thing would be listen to your rising sign. 2 would be remember to try to get into the archetypal essence of the planets and houses, and then watch for them. Don't think that just what the astrologer says or predicts is what's going to happen. Try to pick up on the archetypal essence of what's being talked about, and then notice what's happening. And then also just know that the astrologer has this extraordinary task of trying to capture something of this multivalence and communicate it to a very large group of people. And the final X factor, Kat, is, of course, the specific orientation of the planets in the birth chart. Because if you are experiencing a solar eclipse, like we just had on June 10th of this year in 2021, solar eclipse in Gemini, if that lands on the degree of your ascendant, if that lands exactly on your natal Venus, if that, if Saturn Uranus square that we're dealing with this month is engaging in exact opposition to your natal Venus, that's someone going through a divorce. Whereas someone who it's not configured in that way, you may notice it as a passing influence in the environment or your moods, but it may not hit as dramatically. So the ultimate X factor in horoscopes is that there's going to be a lot of months where things are clicking, not so much even because of the astrologer as it is because of where it's hitting in your chart and the specificities of your birth chart, that month to month are going to change based on what's getting activated in your chart. Different seasons of karma, different times, different planets being activated. When those times are present, I can tell you, usually your horoscopes will really click.
It's kind of like you can't expect the astrologer to do all of the legwork for you. Like, unless you're paying for a reading, and even then it's a conversation. When you're listening to somebody on YouTube or on a podcast, again, your experience will be improved if you've learned a bit about the archetypes yourself, and also if you are paying attention to where these things are happening. And like you said, are you comparing it to your own birth chart? Do you have it pulled up? You can get a free chart created online, so that will also help. Basically doing a little bit of legwork, which I find enjoyable, but maybe not everyone wants to do that.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to add, or at least get your opinion on, was, obviously the people watching this probably really love your horoscopes and your channel, but they probably listen to other astrologers as well, or many will. And they've probably noticed at this point, because you see so many on YouTube, some will resonate more than others. And I don't think it's just about the skill or the popularity of the astrologer. It's just about your connection with that individual. So right. Like, just the way, that you talk about the astrology has always resonated with me. Same with, a small handful of other astrologers. I've been told on my channel something like, oh, you're too technical, or something like that. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to be some like psychic, medium, intuitive type of astrologer. It's not going to be like that. And yeah, so different people will just resonate more.
That's right. That's another really important point. I'm really glad that you brought that up, Kat, because I totally agree with you that, the other thing, the other big X factor is that someone has to read the symbols, and the way that the reader, the diviner, or astrologer communicates also has to speak to you, because if the astrologer can help open your mind, or something about the way that they communicate speaks to your heart, or just kind of resonates with the way that you think or speak or relate, then it's more likely that the symbols will be radical as well. Because at the end of the day, the symbols have always needed readers. So the reader, it's a very personal, spiritual connection. We all have different guides. We all have different people that are with us for different seasons in life. So sometimes having a few matters. I will say on the opposite, not at all to tell people that they should only listen to me, but I will say that sometimes people will find that horoscopes don't carry a lot of weight, or they don't seem to be as relevant or accurate. And some of that is going to be because of oversaturation. So like, if you're a reader, anyone knows this who's been a reader of any kind, if you pull too many tarot cards, it starts getting fuzzy. Everything doesn't, there's no more signals, just static. So similarly, if you take in too much astrological content, if you read, too many horoscopes, if you have too many voices in your head, you may find that some of the inaccuracy is actually coming from the fact that you're sort of flooding the oracle, I call it in my classes, which you have to be careful of. Even if you're not listening to anyone and you're just reading for yourself, you have to be careful of not flooding the oracle. So I think that's probably another important point to add in.
Yeah, it's like in a recent Q&A we did, you talked a lot about closed systems. And I guess at that point, you've no longer got so much of a closed system. It becomes too open, and everything starts being meaningless.
Well, it's the same thing in medicine, right? If you might need a second opinion, or you might need slightly different specialists for different things. But if you have 5 different, let's say therapists, that might be hard for the alchemy of therapy to take place. It's probably not recommended that you have, 5 or 6 different people that you're constantly talking to, or doctors, medical advice. You could extend the metaphor, I guess, anywhere, the analogy anywhere. So yeah, on a certain level, you need the alchemy needs an alembic with a closed top. And that doesn't mean to be closed-minded or to be dogmatic or to only listen to one person and never listen to anything else. But it is being mindful about, what are I have spiritual teachers that I talk to within a specific tradition, specific people that I go to for help. And I'm very careful at this point, having defined the way that I do astrology or who I turn to for advice or whatever. And it's not that I'm closed down to others. It's just that I'm very careful now because I understand the importance of that. That closed system is what allows so much intuitive, magic and healing and insight to come through.
Do you think there's also room for, I don't know, like your own free will, choices that you make on any given month or even across time that is also going to change how certain aspects play out for you?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this is when we say that it's a closed system, like what do we mean by that? And I think part of what we mean by that is that it's describing the karmic field of your life that is unique to you. So the birth chart, for example, like it describes almost like the ecology of karma that you're born into, like the ecological system of karma that you're born into. It doesn't describe a person who's helpless or has no choice within it, but it also doesn't describe someone who's born into completely wide open possibilities. So interacting with that ecosystem consciously, mindfully, virtuously changes your relationship to it and changes the results that you experience in relationship to it. How much, how little, deeply mysterious, but we always have to act as though we can change things for the better through agency, through choice, through virtue. And we always have to be somewhat detached from selfish gain within it and more oriented toward love, peace, prosperity shared with others in our environment, community, respect. I mean, just all of the virtues that all, I think, traditions teach, that if we aim for those things without some really selfish agenda, and have a little bit of detachment about what comes, I think I see people shift their relationship to the symbols of a horoscope or of a birth chart dramatically. So yeah, that's my opinion about that.
Cool. All right. That was really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you again for being here, Kat. Thanks for bringing these questions and creating fun discussion. Check Kat's work out at thecreativeintrovert.com. She does great interviews with people. She does really good astrological work as well. So be sure to check her work out. And if you have questions, feel free to email them to us, info@nightlightastrology.com. Put Q&A in the subject line, and we'll be sure to do an episode at some point. So in the meantime, Kat, you can find Kat on YouTube as well by searching Kat Nelligan or The Creative Introvert and check out her channel. All right, that's what we've got for today. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you again next time. Bye.